The following program is brought to you in living color on the Joe Chaffee Network, which is a pretty good network to be.
JCN.
It works for me.
That's it. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Monday night.
Manic Monday.
Yes, on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, and it says so right up there. The Joe and Joe Weather Show. That's on that side.
Over there.
No, over here.
No, right there. I see it.
Oh.
It's right. See it? That big globe.
That globe.
Never mind.
Well, I'm looking at that globe.
So
Too many years in front of the chroma key. Yes, Monday night. The very cold air knocking on the door, waiting for it to get in.
You know, I was watching over the weekend on some of the various news shows.
See, I don't watch, so I don't get ill. But
Okay.
Go on.
Some of the national news shows, and they're making this out to be like and it's going to be deadly, and stay indoors, and it's going to be. And I said to myself, these temperatures are going to be basically in the coming days or are out west, in the teens and 20s
Right.
and 30s. I said to myself, February we have temperatures that are much colder than this. Why is it that they're equating what's about to happen or is happening now
To
with
the oncoming apocalypse.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, well, no, I understand exactly what you're getting at, and granted, it is the time I've been saying, making sure that we make the distinction between the fact that these temperatures are cold relative to this time of year. We are stretched, out to the far ends of where you could be, either with record lows, which we'll probably have a whole slew of them on Wednesday.
Right.
It's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there in the for the New York numbers that I looked at. But nonetheless, they were all 50-degree temperature drops. I think the thing that drives me crazy about it, maybe am I overthinking it, or am I the only one who thinks this way? But you almost get the sense when you hear this sort of stuff that they're acting as if it's never happened before, and that's the part I object to.
Right.
And I have to tell you something, and I'll see if I can find the link is in there someplace. I'll find it. But yesterday we talked about this on my new Sunday morning show, the Coffee with Chaffee.
Coffee with Chaffee.
Which actually, we had a nice crowd yesterday. I was very happy and shocked at the same time. But I was reading about the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. The anniversary was the 44th anniversary yesterday.
Gordon Lightfoot.
Correct. And in that, I stumbled on an article that focused on that particular date. That just like we've been seeing how the end of October around here has been a problem. The November 10th time frame, there are a number of big weather events that have occurred over the last 100 and some odd years, and the one that really kind of struck me was a big tornado outbreak in the Dakotas that occurred back, I think it was 1911, and they had EF3s, EF4 tornadoes, and so on. And I was thinking about the severe weather outbreak that we had here a couple of weeks ago. And I'm asking, I'm thinking, what's different about now and then? They had them then.
Right.
They're having them now. And in fact, another thing I did before we went on, I was looking the latest round of panic among the snow weenies is they are, God forbid it should snow in the month of November, because if it does, it will curse the rest of the winter. All right. And oddly enough, I went back and I was looking at the November winters back in the late 1880s, very early 1900s. There was about a 40-year stretch where November snows were common. And not just trace amounts or fractions, but we're talking about in inches. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those winters wound up being above normal. Then we seemed to go into a period where it just went quiet. And then we went to another active period in the 30s and 40s, and then it went, quiet for a long time. And in this last 10-year period, we've had 2 sizable snowfalls in and around the metro area, depending on what station you use. But the bottom line is, I just sort of did a quick, look over, and to me, it looked like there were as many winters that were above normal than the snowfall for the whole winter when it snowed in November, and as below. So there's no statistical significance to the jinx that everybody has seemed to convince themselves exists.
Veterans Day to me, I remember two specific Veterans Days. One was Veterans Day 1968, where we had a tremendous coastal storm, so tremendous in fact, the winds were so incredible that it actually caused the Whitestone Bridge to shake.
Wow.
There were people on the bridge who actually got out of their cars and ran off the bridge when they felt that the bridge was vibrating. And I'm told, doing a little bit of research, that the bridge is supposed to do that. You say to yourself, well, they should have tightened the bridge up. They don't tighten it. I think that...
It has to sway.
It has to sway. It has to sway a bit. It's just that with this particular storm...
It swayed more than a little bit.
It swayed more than a little bit.
It
leaned. Can you imagine? No, well...
No.
You know that the Whitestone Bridge is built along the same lines as Galloping Gertie. You've seen that, the famous newsreel of the bridge collapsing out in Washington State or whatever. The Whitestone Bridge was built along, or conforms along those same, types of, the same type of structure. So maybe people were thinking about that they were having another Galloping Gertie situation with the Whitestone Bridge. The other storm that I remember was in 1987, where Long Island and a good part of the tri-state area ended up with a pretty good swath of, I wouldn't even call it snow, it was more like slush that occurred. And so we've had, at least on this particular holiday.
I can seem to recall, I think it was back in 1977, we had the remnants of a tropical depression come up, and I think we got it's the record for the rainfall for the day. It was something like almost 8 inches of rain in New York City fell on that one day. Yes, we should, by the way, it is, certainly have to acknowledge that today is Veterans Day, and all the brave people who have served over the years.
Correct.
And we should, we certainly should acknowledge that. And thank you for your service, for sure.
There were a few services. I'm trying to see now the balance between Memorial Day and Veterans Day.
Yes.
And it seems now more and more that on Veterans Day it's becoming more like Memorial Day. That you're supposed to, of course, honor all the veterans from all of the stages of the armed services, but we also, seemingly, it's matching up now to what we do on Memorial Day, where we honor the men who are no longer, and women
those
who are no longer with us. So.
Well, it's a day we observe, and again, thank you for your service. Meanwhile, as we move to the weather that's going on right now, we've got a lot going on. A number of first of all, thank you to Paul Roman and William Huber, who both hit Super Chats tonight, contributing to what they are calling our Lake Effect trip fund, our bucket trip fund. So that at least gets us 2 lawn chairs. So we'll... At a garage sale.
You're the one who said that it's been your life vision to see an actual lake.
I do. I want to just go up there, sit in a lawn chair, just face the lake. I know exactly where I want to do this. I want to do this in Pulaski, New York, near Watertown, and just sit there and just face the lake and watch them come in. It's quite a sight from some of the pictures that I've seen from some fishing buddies that have put them up.
There's a place not far from Watertown and Pulaski, Barnes Corners.
Yes.
And they get like 500 inches of snow a year on lake effect for the most part.
Yeah.
Nothing
and the schools never close.
Yeah.
We're getting also, Joe, some snow reports from a few folks I happen to notice from a couple of other places. Now, I probably am going to lose it in the chat here, so let me just find this. Austin Belaski picked up 4.5 inches in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and their temps are up there. The average high is 50 this time of year up in Grand Rapids, and they're running 40 degrees below average.
Wow!
So that is that's something. And any of you have got if you've got some snow reports, 9 inches from Steely Dan. He's also in Michigan. Where in Michigan are you, Steely Dan? Let us know. I'm just going back here, picking up if you put something up and amount-wise and I skipped over it, just put it in the chat again, because when I roll back, it's about 4 hours worth of chat, so it's kind of hard it sort of gets
These
lost in
guys
the
get
sauce.
started well before we do, don't they?
Well, I set the live stream up usually between 3 and 4 o'clock.
Right.
So once I do that, it goes up live on YouTube, and there's a countdown clock saying,
Right.
3 hours to the live stream, 2
Right.
hours or whatever.
Right.
The chat board opens up.
Right.
So if you go, if you go on my YouTube channel, you can talk to me, because I go in and out depending on what I'm doing.
Right.
But you can certainly talk to me or anybody else, any of the other folks that get on there early, and it's actually a good time to get some questions to me, assuming that I'm watching every waking minute, which I'm not. But it's a good time if you've got a question on there that you would like addressed in the show, to just kind of put it up on there, and then I'll do the best I can to see to answer it. So shall we take a look at, when you consider, John, I was looking at this map, the thing that struck me this morning in terms of the watches and warnings and the extent of all the winter weather advisories and the winter storm warnings that are up around the Great Lakes, and particularly up in upstate New York and through up northern New England, you would think we have a wrapped up low somewhere, and we don't. And that's probably, if you look at what's missing from here, is probably a slew of flood watches in the warm air. So this is really just, it's an Arctic boundary with a little wave on it that's moving along, and it's bringing through an area of snow, and it's grinding out several inches or more in some places.
Right. Chicago had a tough day today. Over at O'Hare Field, there was one flight that came in and actually slipped off the runway, or had icy conditions on the runway. So it's been tough for places that are to the west and to the north of our area, but here in the immediate New York area, we really lived a charmed life today, didn't we? We had a spring-like day with temperatures right around 60 degrees.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting with regards to Chicago, and not this time around, but Denver's having their own wild weather in terms of big temperature changes. They went from Ruthless Goat, who's a regular here too, said that he went basically from 75 to 13 in the last 24 hours with snow on the ground. So, but there's a number of cities across the plains and the Rockies.
Wait a minute, you went from 75 to 13?
In temperatures, yeah.
And he has snow on the ground.
And now he's got snow on
Wait
the
a
ground.
minute, what happened to
the warm ground? Yes. Okay, so that's something that always comes up. I think in the world of weather, in the world of weather lore that comes out in the wintertime especially, the warm ground theory is right up there with the sun angle theory.
Yeah.
Well, that's not a theory with the sun angle, but the whole pointing to those two things as reasons why you should or shouldn't forecast snow. And that is, I addressed that today on my Patreon, on my subscription platform, because a few people were asking about it. And here's the thing about the warm ground, okay? This is snow accumulation, and you might see if you agree with me on this. Snow accumulation, if you didn't know what the temperature was, is really the biggest factor, in my opinion, is the rate of snowfall.
Right.
Okay? So if you're given a certain temperature, it's the rate of snowfall that really determines how quickly it accumulates. If you are, sitting at 32 or 3 and you have heavy snow falling, a quarter of a mile visibility or less, or even moderate snow falling at a half a mile or less, that snow's going to stick on roadways. I don't care if it was 70 degrees the day before.
Right.
And you and I know from 2 years ago,
Right.
where we set all-time record highs in the month of February with temperatures into the 70s and had a 1.5-foot blizzard the next day,
Right.
with temperatures that fall in the upper teens. Guess what? The warm ground works for about 20 or 30 minutes. And then the rate of snowfall and how quickly is the temperature changing, because once you get that temperature to 32 and it's snowing really hard, it's going to stick everywhere.
Right. I would agree.
Okay.
I would agree. And of course also the time of the day. Obviously if it comes during the daylight hours with the sun up, even though the sun's not visible, those infrared and ultraviolet rays interacting with the blacktop help to hold off the accumulation for a while. But if it comes during the nighttime hours with no sunlight, that snow is going to stick,
Right.
regardless of the temperature. Boom.
But
just
even
like that.
even during the daytime, especially this time of year and going into maybe at least the first part of February, even in the daytime, if it's snowing hard enough, it's going to stick. Okay, that's just how it goes. So you see the extent here of the you saw the extent of all the winter storm warnings that are up, and when you look at it on the satellite, Joe, again, there's no you could see that it's this sort of kind of a sideways rectangle of clouds running from the southwest, where if you look closely, you can actually see a little bit of turning there. So there is some sort of shortwave trough in that southwestern part of the jet stream. But it's just a straight line ahead of this really, really cold air, and we're just waiting for that cold air to drop in.
It will be driven in, actually. That wave of low pressure to the west of us will pass to our north, and eventually will drive that cold front through here during the day tomorrow. And I gave the time frame, at least for the Hudson Valley, 3 to 6 a.m. for the arrival of the rain, 8 to 11 a.m. for the turning over of the rain to mix with snow, eventually going over to all snow. And I think we'll be done with the snow or whatever precip is falling by about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Not really a long enough period of time for any significant snow accumulations. And in fact, I think in this particular case tomorrow, we're probably looking at the most significant snows falling on unpaved surfaces or grassy surfaces. And you might in elevated areas, places in Orange County, for example, in Dutchess County, they're above 1,000 feet. You might very well see an inch or two accumulate, especially up in those hilly terrain areas by early tomorrow afternoon when the snow finally winds on down. But for most everybody else, if you're worried about having to break out your snow blower or even your snow shovel, I really don't think that's going to be a big concern or a major problem.
Joe's talking about our general area that we cover, which is eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. You see the surface map that's up there. You see where the wave is. The Albany right now is 33 in rain, which which is for snow lovers, that is the most depressing observation that you could ever see on a weather map.
But they're playing it very, very close to trouble.
Right, because it's just north and west of there that the snow lines up. We'll show them on the radar in a second. Just want to mention two things. Kenneth Corden, who is in the Finger Lakes in Ovid, New York, says, the snow is just a small amount of snow sticking to the ground now where he is. And we're now just waiting for the main push, which is coming from the west. Edward McGann points out a big stratospheric warm-up is on the way, but that doesn't necessarily correlate with the second half of what you're saying here, which is that it'll be warm from Thanksgiving till Christmas in the east. That does not necessarily play in that, but I'm going to address. We're going to look at that in the long range a little bit. A little bit later on, but there's there's the wave. It's not a particularly deep one. It's a 10-10 Winslow, and that's moving, kind of perturbating along that stalled frontal boundary. But the air behind this is very cold. I mean, for this time of year, November 11th, and you're seeing temperatures at 4 o'clock in the afternoon that are in the teens and single digits up across Minnesota and the Dakotas with this high that's coming down. That is that's tough. That's tough.
Well, did you see that football game yesterday? I think it was at Lambeau Field in Green Bay.
Yes, so they had snow there.
So the snow was falling, and you could see the ball players' breaths. So yeah, it was pretty darn cold out there. It is pretty cold right now.
All right, so here's the radar at the moment, and actually the radar is fairly loaded now pulling out of Illinois. But through a good chunk of Indiana. It's done in Chicago. You can see, by the way, Joe, the lake effect snow over along the east shores of Lake Michigan in that north-south line. That's pretty impressive. It's just kind of hugging that coastline, coming down into northwest Indiana. And then the leading edge of snow in upstate New York looks like it's running just along or just north of I-90. So it's Syracuse is just barely in it at the moment. And Rochester might be getting back into it, but you're kind of waiting for this main push. It actually sort of underwhelmed a little bit in terms of the leading area. This you notice there's no precip at all from central New York all the way down the East Coast. So there's a bit of a dry slot here that is pushed up on the east side.
Turned out to be a lovely day for the Veterans Day Parade here in New York City. And you say to yourself, when was the last time on Veterans Day the temperature was 60 with a fair amount of sunshine, just some thin high clouds. It was a perfect day for a parade today.
Welcome to James Moore, by the way, who just is on the chat board tonight. He took meteorology at OU. I assume that's Ohio University, but more than that, I've been a storm tracker for 42 years. Great job, because for you storm trackers, you guys really help out help us weather people out when it comes to getting reports in to figure out just exactly what's going on.
Right, we need these weather observers. I may have mentioned, I'll mention again, a couple of weeks ago we lost one of the really great weather observers in the Hudson Valley, Dr. Jerome Thaler, who wrote actually papers and also a few books on Hudson Valley climatology and weather. And he died. He was 90 years old. He got the Thomas Jefferson Award for most consecutive number of days where he took weather observations from the Yorktown Heights area. He had been doing it for like 50 some odd years, and then he passed it over to his son. His son is now doing the weather observations in place of his dad, who again passed away a couple of weeks ago. But these are guys, Joe, that really are into it and have been taking their observations for so many years and have been so helpful to not just the private but also the public forecasters at the National Weather Service in giving them a handle and an idea as to what is going on in those micro-scale type of weather scenarios.
All right, so we've got this flat wave. I have the GFS up. I just figure let me switch over. We'll go to the upper air first and show what's happening, because you've got this whole trough that's swinging across the Great Lakes and just progressing along. One of the issues for tomorrow, from what I was looking at with this Arctic boundary, is of course the boundary comes through and then you get the precip, at least for us. Right. And you do have, at least in the upper atmosphere, the upper air winds are staying mostly south or southwest through the day tomorrow. They don't really shift to the west until tomorrow late afternoon or evening. So that might be supportive for some precip here after the front goes by. The question is, how much gets generated, and if it does get generated, how well does it hold together? Because there's not a whole, you don't have all the real energy with this is pretty far up to the north. So there's no Atlantic moisture around, really. If there was, we'd be raining here right now, and you'd be seeing snow up a much bigger area of snow across New York State and up through New England, but that was not the case. So this, I don't really see anything that indicates that there's some upside possibilities tomorrow. I think, if anything, it could be the other way, where either the cold air doesn't get in fast enough, or if it gets in too quickly and it's too dry, that the precip dries up on the west side. So there might be, more of an argument to say that there would be less rather than more for tomorrow. I don't think you'd argue with me on that.
Yeah, we're only looking at, what are we looking at for snow, for total liquid precipitation amount?
2/10.
2/10 at most, I think. Yeah, I agree on that.
2/10. So here's our trough. It comes through, and of course the trough is right along the coast Wednesday morning. The core of the cold air that's coming down is going to be with us. That's going to pull out. There's another weaker trough that kind of swings in for Thursday. You see it here, that little blue area back through the lakes. Then you've got another system that's dropping down in southeastern Canada. That almost actually pushes through a bit of a backdoor cold front here on Friday.
Right.
So even though we're going to moderate with the core of the cold air moving out, it's going to take a while for us to warm up back to normal. I think we're going to stay chilly through the weekend.
Well, I think we'll take a run at 50 probably on Friday.
Friday, yes. There'll be a warm-up with this first pull-out.
Right.
That warm-up back to 50 still doesn't bring us back to average.
Right.
But we will bounce, just like we did on Saturday.
Right.
On Sunday, we will bounce. And then you get this back door to come down, and we'll probably have another cold shot, not as cold as this, but still, a fairly reasonable cold shot for this time of year. And then after that, I'm not 100% sure what's going to happen. The models are trying to drop some kind of trough down into the Ohio Valley, and you've got this southern energy. Let me just back it up. We've got this upper low over Baja California that kind of moves along, and that gets kicked out ahead of this stronger trough that digs into the southeast. this would imply that there might be some kind of system rolling up the coast here early next week. We'll have to wait and see how whether that's reality or not.
And that looks like rain more than snow.
Yeah, I mean, there's not going to be a whole lot of cold. There might be colder air up in upstate New York and New England with this, but that would be the extent of it. It's not going to be the kind of cold air like we're seeing now.
Right.
And we'll come back to the long range again in a little bit. I want to just go to the surface map. We'll put up the HRRR and see what that has anything exciting to tell us. But here's the GFS, Joe. I mean, it's got this stick of rain that comes through. I'm still not 100% sure how this new upgraded model, when they tried to bring it in last year, it had this, earlier this year, it had this horrible cold bias, and then they said they fixed it. Now, I'm not sure what kind of bias it has, because it has just this stick of rain that comes through tomorrow with a little bit of snow. The NAM has had a little bit more earlier today. And then it's just cold and dry after that with a gusty wind during the day tomorrow night into Wednesday morning. And I think we're going to see record lows go by on Wednesday.
Right. In fact, the record low at Central Park for Wednesday morning is 22 degrees, and we're going to be awfully close to that on Wednesday morning. So it will be interesting if we tie it or even break it. We don't break. It's one thing about record highs. We seem to be breaking a lot more of those as opposed to record lows, at least in recent years. But that'd be one to really for the record books. If we can get down to 22 or even lower than that on Wednesday morning.
The other stations in and around New York, I was looking at some of the records. As I mentioned earlier, it's a smaller. The records don't go back as far as Central Park does, which is 150 years. But the other stations have relatively low hanging fruit. The records that may all get broken are the daytime records on Wednesday, because the record low highs, quote unquote.
Right.
Those may all go if it doesn't get much above the lower mid 30s.
Yeah, I remember one. I remember one Christmas. I think it was Christmas 1980.
-2.
It was -2, but in brilliant sunshine later that afternoon, 2-3 o'clock, the temperature at Central Park was 7.
7.
So
I went to midnight mass at St. Benedict's the night before, and it had snowed like a nice coating to an inch.
Right.
And it was snowing when I walked to church and snowing when I left, and it was still in the 20s.
Wow.
And then to wake up that morning, it was -2, which was just insane.
And sea fog. There was
and
people
sea fog.
reporting on Long Island Sound and the Hudson River sea smoke, because the water was so much warmer than the air that was overlying it. It was amazingly cold. And believe it or not, 3 years later, Christmas time 1983, almost equally as cold as what we went through in 1980.
Yes. Meanwhile, around the rest of the country with that cold high, of course, you've got some snow down tonight. It's going to extend down through the central Appalachians, and there's all sorts of winter weather advisories up there, with some rain showers developing ahead of that in western North and South Carolina and northern Georgia. The southern end of this down in Texas, at least if the GFS is correct, and I can check this later on, Del Rio, Texas, is actually showing some freezing rain and sleet along the Mexican border. And up in the northwest, we've got a system coming in, bringing some rain and snow into Montana. That's dropping southeastward rather quickly. It doesn't look like there's a whole lot to that. And then it shifts over to the lakes. I thought yesterday, Joe, and I don't know if this is going to happen or not, but I thought yesterday with this high going into New England and an onshore flow on Thursday that would bring in a lot of clouds, and that maybe it might even pop up. It's going to be cold on Thursday also. I mean, we're talking about, and maybe only back into the low 40s. But the air aloft is still going to be cold. I wonder whether we might see some little spotty precip that shows up on Thursday. I don't know. I just put in for clouds for now and kind of left it there. And then we'll see what happens. And then, of course, you can watch that area of rain in the Gulf of Mexico on Thursday that moves into the southeast with a low. That low passes out, and then there's a second low that forms behind it that the models were, got that energy that comes down. And this is for early next week. High pressure up in northern Maine, and you lift up what looks like a low. And I guess there's enough cold air aloft for the models to at least generate some snow in interior areas and elevated areas in Pennsylvania and on up to upstate New York and New England with this. We'll have to see whether that's real or not. But it does seem to suggest that some sort of coastal low is going to come up early next week. The European was sort of in the same place, but we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, that's still a week away. What we were looking to talk about a week earlier.
Correct.
We were talking about well, what's going to happen. What was it on Friday, and then what was going to happen today or tomorrow?
So here's the snowfall. This does not include, by the way, any snowfall that that has already fallen in some places. So you're looking at additional snowfalls in some areas across the Great Lakes of 3 to 6 inches, and even some big amounts up on the Upper Peninsula. And of course, you see what's happening along the Great Lakes. So I just want to zero in a bit on the Central Appalachians down through Kentucky and into parts of West Virginia. Hopefully, this will populate the numbers. And because when you're on that wide shot, you really don't see that many numbers on there. But on this tighter view, I'll just add a few things. Maybe this might make it a little easier to see for the folks at home. But some 2, 3, 4-inch amounts, and I guess this is going to be elevation driven in terms of the higher amounts in parts of West Virginia. A lot of areas down across Kentucky into Tennessee and even into western North Carolina and northwestern South Carolina, seeing a coating to an inch in some places. Oh, it looks like it even gets down to about the Alabama border and northernmost Georgia, according to the Weather Service forecast. And as far as the Northeast is concerned, they've got some, that coating to an inch line down to just north of New York City, and we're looking at some 1 foot plus amounts, and some of this is going to be lake effect driven eventually on the shores of Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, south shores of Lake Ontario rather than the eastern shores, so more around Rochester, Syracuse, and maybe a little bit less, but still ample snows up east of Lake Ontario on up into northeastern New York. And then, of course, you've got Maine, where, it just snows. It just snows.
Go up to Caribou, Maine, or Madawaska, Maine, St. John's, Fort Kent. I mean, these are the places that, they get hit hard and they get hit early.
And they usually don't, unless you're down the coast they do, but if you're inland, not even that far inland, the rain-snow line issues when it comes to forecasting, you probably look forward to them because it gives you a challenge as a forecaster rather than just, basically putting a snow forecast and then putting your feet up on the chair and watching the flakes come down.
And you talk about the heavily populated northeastern United States. Well, I got to tell you, if you want a place in the Northeast that is not very heavily populated, that is almost verging on sparsely populated, you go up into northern Maine, because there ain't a whole heck of a lot of things that are happening up there. And I guess part of the reason is the weather. A lot of people don't particularly care for the cold and the snow, but there it is. On
my list of places to go. All right, so let's do a little long range, shall we?
Okay.
So I want to start back with a graphic that I made on one of my long-range weather posts last week to just kind of explain, what exactly is happening as far as the jet stream is concerned. And this is, when we talk about those teleconnection indices with in this particular instance, I'm talking about the East Pacific Oscillation, okay? And this is how I boxed in the areas. And if you go to the ESRL website, where, or is it ERSL? I always flipping letters. I'm going to go to it in a minute, so I'll get you the link. It actually gives you the latitude and longitude and how they calculate this. And basically, it's just a calculation that they do, just differences in pressure. And they look at different geographic areas. And in the case of the East Pacific Oscillation, it's higher pressures in that boxed geographic area that I have, which covers parts of Alaska, northwest Canada, and the coastal waters in the northern part of the Gulf of Alaska, and the pressures that are down south of 35 degrees north toward 20 degrees north over from Hawaii on one side, and then almost but not quite back to the California coast on the other. And if you notice on this particular map, you've got this big upper high, a split flow. You have this big upper high in northern Alaska. You've got a deep upper low south of the Aleutians, and there's this trough that goes all the way down to Hawaii. So that sets up a negative East Pacific oscillation. And if you see where the black arrows are, that's where our air is coming from. It's following the jet around that high up in Alaska. The cold air is coming over the top of it, drives down into northern Canada, north central Canada, and then drives further southeast into the plains, the Great Lakes. And in this instance, because the trough in the east is so deep, the cold air goes all the way down into the southeast U.S. and into northern Florida. This, by the way, this map was how the jet stream looked on Saturday morning. So this is, when we talk about an negative East Pacific oscillation, and in this particular instance, it was really stretched to an extreme. This is what an extreme stretched out jet stream pattern looks like. And this drives cold air into the eastern part of the United States.
Now, if we had, instead of a high pressure over Alaska, if we had a trough of significance over that part of the continent, would that mean everything would be flipped? For example, that unusually warm Christmas Eve, Christmas Day we had, I think it was about 5 years ago, where we had temperatures
Right, during the El
70s.
Nino year, which
Yeah.
was December of 16.
Yeah, so I mean, if we had that kind of a pattern, would that be something that would help to set up an unseasonably warm weather pattern?
Well, if you have low pressure up there, where I have it, that box where it says high pressure, if there's low pressure up there and favors troughing in the west, then yes, because then you don't have that the black arrows showing what I would call a Canadian connection,
Right.
bringing down cold air. You won't have that. You'd have southerly winds in that part of Canada
Probably
around the
something
upper
driving-
low.
Probably have something driving from the desert southwest or
Right.
or Texas up to where we are. So,
Now, there might be other things going on in the North Atlantic. Say if we had some really strong blocking that might, change things in terms of the overall look in the east. But if you just have that alone, and that winds up developing a ridge of high pressure along the east coast where you have a southwest flow, then yes, then you would be warm, and that would reflect a positive East Pacific oscillation. Now, again, we're talking here in a really general, broad sense. There are a lot of other puzzle pieces in the mix that you have to look at, but this is what we had. And I bring this up because when we look at the teleconnections going forward, one of the things that we're going to be losing now is that negative East Pacific oscillation. So it at least is telling us, Joe, that beginning this weekend, this coming weekend, the East Pacific oscillation goes slightly positive, and then it gets a little strongly more positive as we go into the week after that, that this cold pattern and these cold air masses coming from Western Canada, at least, that's going to stop for a little while.
right.
The other two things that I would just point out that are important in the scheme of the overall pattern is that right now we also have a strong Pacific North America index, and one day I'll do a graphic and we'll go back and explain, because we'll show you the geographic areas with this, because there's a lot of geographic areas that go with this one.
Now, does this graphic that you've been bringing up over the last week, is this graphic on tropical tidbits, or is it a completely
No, this is
different-
at esrl.noaa.gov, and I can put the link up in the chat shortly. And if anybody wants to take a look at it, they certainly can. But one of the things we're seeing here at the moment with the Pacific North America Index, combined with that negative East Pacific oscillation, is that it's very strongly positive, and we can see that reflected. Because the PNA, as you can call it in shorthand, if I bring it up on the North America view, and let me just roll back to today. By the way, I can't emphasize this enough, these are snapshots of the atmosphere. They're not really predictive. It comes off the model. It's done once a day from the overnight run, and it looks at the GFS and says, okay, this is what the pressure difference, this is what all of these numbers calculate to. If you ran it 6 hours later or 12 hours later, you could certainly come up with a whole different
Well, this is the 18,
scenario.
This is the 18Z.
Right, but that's the zeros. That's off the 0Z run.
Right.
But in terms of the Pacific North America Index, that's calculated. It's calculated as the pressure changes out in the west, but it also takes into account pressure changes off the southeast coast. If you've got lower pressures off the southeast coast and higher pressures in the west, that gives you a big positive number, and that is also can be looked at as far as strength of storminess and also perhaps the delivery of cold air if you combine it with that EPO. But this is what a very strongly positive Pacific North America Index looks like on this. Here we go. So this is this evening. So that would be what you're seeing, this very, very strong PNA that's off the wall. And of course the NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation, which measures the same kind of things out in the North Atlantic, is weekly positive and has been for a while. Interestingly, though, as we get toward Thanksgiving, it is forecast to go neutral and then go negative. And I noticed on today's GFS run, the late afternoon run in particular, but there have been a few of them like this. If we go out in the longer term, and I've also noticed a few of the some weather chatter going on regarding this, but if you watch this going forward across Canada, you start to see higher pressures there, and it does kind of get to much more of a blocky look here as we move toward Thanksgiving. Now, this one of the things I would just say at home, if you're watching this, is even though you have what looks like a blocky look, the air in Canada is actually moving from west to east over the top.
Right.
So you don't have you don't really have a whole lot of cold air with this.
You almost have a fire hose effect in northern Canada.
Yeah, to a certain extent you do.
Yeah.
I mean, you do have blocking going on, so there might be other things at play in terms of the lower levels of the atmosphere, but not really seeing a Canadian connection here yet. That may come as we go into December, but this does have a bit of a, you got these lows that are sitting, pretty far south along about 40 or 45 degrees north or near 50 north. And now you've got higher pressures that are all up in this area. So maybe perhaps there's something to the idea that as we go toward the end of November and the beginning of December that we may be in a bit more of a blocky pattern. Doesn't necessarily mean anything as far as snow is concerned for you snow lovers out there, but it is something that is certainly interesting enough that we're going to obviously pay attention to it.
The last December was weird. Last December, I don't think we had very much. I don't remember, at least in our area, the folks who are watching outside of the New York tri-state area. I don't think we had all that much in the way of snow, and yet there was a record-breaking snowfall in the southern states.
Yes, and that was because the NAO was too strong.
Right.
You had too much blocking
And shunted everything.
Well, you had too much blocking, and you also you got to have traffic out you have to get weather systems out in the Atlantic.
Right.
You got to have things to create some sort of log jam so that a storm that is coming from the Gulf states or off the southeast coast or where there's a natural tendency for it to want to go straight east, it can't because there's something out there. If you think back a few weeks ago when we had, I believe when we had the post-tropical system of Nestor, there was a low that was out sitting well east of the Carolinas that was just sitting there. So it couldn't go out straight east. It had to turn northward, and it actually brought its rain, pretty far up the coast.
Which was not anticipated.
Right. So
I said, in fact, on the Friday before that storm was due to come our way, and it looked like it was going to miss us. And I said, if it misses us completely, will it be an empty Nestor?
yes, you did say that.
Wah, wah.
Wah, 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 wah. So,
Norm Devoskin would be proud of me.
all right, so somebody happened to notice, insert cool name here. What's the 2004 Breeders' Cup? Those are horse races, okay? So that's a straight link to the Breeders' Cup website so that I can go look at past horse races that I either won or didn't bet on or didn't bet on or should have bet on or bet the wrong horse on, and occasionally, did bet on the right horse or horses. But I enjoy horse racing very much, so I especially.
Did you get to Saratoga this year?
I did not get to Saratoga this year. It's 3 years in a row that I was planning on going and didn't.
Methinks that next summer you'll have plenty of time on your hands to get to Saratoga.
Yes, no, I plan to go. We are, by the way, Joe, we are 504 folks on. Thank you, those of you who are on.
Wow.
Hit the subscribe button and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and make sure you got your notifications turned on, because we do these live streams almost every day. And we should point out that on Sunday mornings we started a new thing, the Coffee with Chaffee show.
Now there's something you ought to have. You ought to create a mug that says Coffee with Chaffee on it.
Well, that's a good idea. Yeah. I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And I'll put it on my Shopify store.
Right.
So, we're up to 521 and counting. John Trabacchino, Steve LaPointe, Mac Attack,
No,
Lisa Marie Nueve.
This is an optical illusion, because my wife has said for years nobody would sit and listen to us blither for more than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I hope she's watching now. Maybe she is watching now.
Well, she might, at least for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Tizvi Mizrahi. I'm a big weather guy. I have an idea around when New York City is under the gun for a major nor'easter this winter. Would that I only know. Would that either of us would only know.
There's a gentleman who you and I know, and I know maybe a little bit more intimately because I used to work for him. He lives up in Cold Spring, New York. His name is Jim Witt, and he provides a calendar. And all the money that is, when people buy the calendar, all the money goes to children's relief funds. He has the Hope for Youth Foundation. But he claims that he has a method that was taught to him by a gentleman named Harry Geiss, who used to do the weather on Channel 2 here in New York back in the mid-'60s. And involves, I think, the moon and the sun and whatever. And get this now, Joe. In 1969, Jim made up a list of dates. Mm-hmm. Dates to watch.
Okay.
For major storms or whatever. And it runs all the way until the end of this upcoming decade, I think. The end of, to 2030. He made that list up in 1969, and he swears by it.
Well, is there a margin of error, like in terms of if you pick a date is within 2 or 3 days of either side of that? And, I wonder how statistically that all, plays out.
All I could say is that if he was wrong more often than he was right, his calendar probably wouldn't be anywhere near as popular as it is.
Well, that's a good point. So do you have any inside information about what's coming up on this calendar?
The calendar is in the room where we work. In fact, you're going to be on for another few more. We're going to be on another few more. I'm going to go get the calendar. I'm going to read off some of his dates to watch for this winter.
Okay, good. So he'll be right back. Edward McGann, the ridge in Alaska breaks down in a day or so, and in zonal flow for the next few weeks. I won't disagree with that. I think that indeed is going to be the case. The extreme stratospheric warming. Okay, so the idea is if you break the polar vortex down in the stratosphere, that would favor higher than normal pressures across the poles and shift the jet stream much further to the south. And the idea is that it would bring colder air further south into the United States. The problem is with that, and we saw this last year when the polar vortex split in, I believe it was late January or early February, but it didn't translate down to the lower atmosphere. In other words, there's the tropopause that separates the bottom part of the atmosphere and the stratosphere. And the energy of that breakdown didn't seem to have the impact on the lower atmosphere that you would have, that those who watched that sort of thing were anticipating. So it didn't really change the flavor of the winter. And the thing is, as far as last year was concerned, the dominating factor was the absolutely unrelenting Pacific jet fire hose that we had. And that never really broke down at any point. So it seemed as if that the overriding factor to everything was that the fire hose Pacific jet. Now, with that being said, I would just say that we don't have that We don't have that this fall. There is no fire hose jet that runs from Japan across the United States and then across the Atlantic. We have a lot of amplitude in the Pacific. There's a lot of storm systems out there, a lot of traffic. deep trough at 160. That was all non-existent last year. So right there, the setup in the Pacific is completely different. And while the pattern here across the United States is going to go zonal, in other words, it's going to go more west to east, there's no sign of the Pacific changing very much. So I would say that given that whatever change we are seeing in the United States and over North America itself in the next coming weeks is a temporary one, and that we're going to change it to something again. And maybe that's where the changes in the North Atlantic might have impact with regards to what's going to happen down the road. By the way, our number's up to 551.
Oh.
So they heard you were giving dates out,
and they came running. Well, first of all, here's the calendar. Now this calendar has been put out every year since.
They put it up a little closer to the camera.
Right there. Can you see it?
Yeah. So it's the 2019 Hudson Valley weather calendar with Jim Witt long range forecasts.
Right.
And there's a lot of the pictures are beautiful inside with regards to.
Jim used to have one guy do his photography, but he passed away. I think it was in his 90s, and now he has a whole bunch of people who take pictures. I mean, take a look at this. This is a gorgeous shot right here of a fall scene in the Hudson Valley. Now, he's been putting his calendar out. He has made for the Hope for Youth Foundation since 1986. Since 1986, he has made $4 million. And he gives this out, Joe, to all different kinds of children's charities. His own, and he is the one who founded the Hope for Youth Foundation. Now, as I said, he has come up with what he calls a list of Mother Nature's coming attractions. This is quite amazing.
Okay. Yeah,
he goes all the way out.
There you go. Show it again. I'm sorry.
Take a look. Now this right here.
You can't really see it too clearly, but those are all dates that he has.
Dates going all the way out to the year 2028. And he writes, the dates listed below have a high probability of causing future weather problems. On these dates, expect rain and thunderstorms during the spring, summer, and autumn months. During the wintertime, the precipitation may be in the form of snow. More often than not, these events will be followed by strong northwesterly winds, clearing skies, and cooler or colder temperatures, and a portion of this research will be used to construct future long-range calendars. Jim is in his 80s now, and just to make sure that this calendar continues, if possibly he departs the scene anytime soon, he has made this calendar, or his calendar's up for the next 10 years. So he wants this to continue, and he wants this. Now, I'm going to give you these dates. These dates cover, of course, the upcoming season, or the upcoming 2019-2020 season. First date he's got is November 19th through the 21st. Now, when is that? Is that a week from now?
Yeah. So you know what? When you bring
isn't that storm?
Let's take a look. Let's see. Hold on. I'll bring it up here. Where did that window go?
He also categorizes that as key number 3, and number 3 says these dates have a planetary connection. He actually uses, I think, the motions of the planets as well. I don't know how he does it. He says during spring, summer, and autumn, expect higher probability of rain or even heavy thunderstorms followed by strong northwest winds, clearing skies, and briefly cooler or colder temperatures. Cold front passage.
All right, so what was that first date?
November 19th through the 21st.
All right, so I guess my question is, I know we are the center of the universe,
right?
Okay, but if there's a storm in one part of the country, doesn't necessarily mean it's a storm in another.
Well, I think he's doing it specifically for the New York.
All right, so this is the 19th,
right?
Okay, so there's your low, your coastal low for early next week.
Right.
That moves right up the coast.
Right.
Okay.
So he's got one.
So he's got there. So what's the next one?
The next one doesn't come until January.
Oh, okay. So then we obviously the GFS doesn't go.
Trash the whole month of December.
There were certain other weather companies who go out for the get far enough into January, but this one we don't. We don't go beyond the 16-day time frame.
Right. So January 7th through the 9th of 2020, and he associates that day with a high energy cycle on the sun, and this may feature intense storminess. So maybe if you want your big winter storm, all of you snow winnies out there, that's the day to circle on your calendar. Then he's also got February 15th through the 17th of 2020. You know who else I remember doing this? Gordon Barnes.
Yes.
On WCBS News Radio 88. He used to sometimes give lists of dates to watch. February 15th through the 17th, 2020, and then March 8th to 10th, 2020, and finally for the end of the season, March 19th to 21st, 2020. The two storms that he says may be associated with intense storminess is the one in January, the 7th through the 9th,
Right.
and the one on the 19th to the 21st, an equinox storm maybe, March
Wow.
19th and 2020. And if any of you are interested and you want a calendar, and
All right, so
I'm
I'm going to write this down in the chat, so go ahead.
you can go to, there is a mailing address here.
Is there a
And I say it's
website?
only, I think it's Hope, he uses the letters, Hope,
Hold on.
HFYF.com. Will that work? Or
Here, hang on. I'm just going to see if I can find his website with this. Go ahead, keep going. You were
or
saying.
maybe if you just type Hope for Youth Foundation.
Okay, let's see. There is actually an article, an older article on Patch. I want to see if they put a link up here. Calendars are on sale. Well, I don't know what year this piece was written in. Okay, so this was in 2019. You would hope that they would put a link on here.
Like I said, I think he does have a Hope for Youth Foundation.
Right. Proceeds from the calendar sales go to help children with life-threatening illnesses and for the Hope for Youth Foundation.
It's PO. If you want to get a calendar, $12 per calendar.
Right, and they're available by mail for
Right.
a
P.O. Box 8, Buchanan, New York.
All right, let me put it in the chat board here. P.O. Box
8,
8.
Buchanan, New York, and the zip code is 10511.
B-U-C-H-A. Buchanan.
B-U-C-H
Right.
A-N-A-N.
A-N-A-N. New York. And what's the zip?
10511. And make checks payable not to Jim, but to Hope for Youth Foundation. So Hope for Youth Foundation.
For Youth Foundation. So you would and was it $8?
It's 12. I think.
$12.
$12. It used to be 8. I think they jumped in the last year or two. But anyway, it's interesting. It's fun. If for nothing else, if you say to yourself, no one can predict the weather that way. All right, all fine and good. But at least you have a beautiful calendar that you can put.
And the money goes to
to
a great cause.
And the money goes for a great cause. And I think that is the primary thing is that Jim is doing this, pretty much on his own, with help from others and a few other people and everything. But $4 million over since 1986 for children's, foundations to help kids who were dealt a bad hand in life, and I think that's very, very good. And the forecasts, see how they all pan out or play out.
Chuck Cardillo wants to know, is Gordon Barnes still with us?
Yes, I think he is. In fact, I came across a site where he was, and this must be a few years ago, where he was in a conversation with somebody, and he was talking about not just weather, but also aviation and other stuff. But I still think he's around. He was quite a character back in the 60s and up to about the mid 70s, and then he left New York and he went to Washington D.C. and then for a while I think he was on CNN, and then he just disappeared, which is what we all tend to do when we tend.
We just disappear.
We just disappear.
By the way, we should point out. One of the things I've always been frustrated about with regards to doing what I do is the fact that, you can sometimes say things until you're blue in the face and people don't hear you, or they hear every fifth word. And I mention this with regards to the fact that I'm not going anywhere from the standpoint of my online presence, this YouTube channel. Everything not only continues, but it will probably continue in an even bigger way. So just remember that we're ending our TV time here at FiOS 1 News because they're shutting us down. So that part of it is over, And I have made the decision that I don't want to go work for anybody else for another television station. And I want to just do my online stuff all the time. My subscription site, which is right up there, my Patreon site, patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Chaffee, which is just $2 a month. No, right, you got it.
There it is, right.
And by the way, as far as the Joe and Joe weather show is concerned, we're gonna try to Skype it. So we'll try and do it on a regular basis. Maybe we can do it once a week, or you see what your schedule is like, and we'll figure something out. So we're still gonna be here. We're just gonna kind of do it a bit differently, and I got to get my audio straightened out at home. So once we do that, we got it.
And I still haven't really it's all sunk in yet. But that storm, let's say Monday, Tuesday,
right?
And I was thinking that initially, I was saying to myself, "Oh boy, that's going to be tough when you're coming in or traveling or whatever into that or whatever."
No, it isn't.
And I said, wait a minute, I don't have to do any traveling because there won't be any place to go beginning next Monday.
Well, you know what I thought of this morning as I was leaving. I think of all of us, I do the longest distance every day. I do 130 miles a day, so I multiplied that by 5 and got to 650. And do you know what I said?
What?
650 miles to Aunt Sally's pecan pralines.
Yep. It's been a while. Maybe on Friday we'll start reminiscing about our respective careers.
Yeah, we got plenty of time.
Unless something really,
unless they throw us off by Thursday,
spectacular happens or whatever. And let me point out, it's not FiOS One News that's shutting us down. It's Verizon.
Right.
That is shutting us down.
Right, and that's just the it's the nature of television and the nature of the business. That's just how it is.
Right.
I don't know. There's not
Alan
really much more you
Casper.
could say. Well, he shut down with Satellite News Channel.
Alan Casper and Todd Gross. You're absolutely right. My former boss, Todd Gross, and Alan Casper, which you've mentioned many times, they were at a place called Satellite News Channel, which started up right after CNN. I don't know exactly what CNN did, but CNN more or less put them out of business.
They bought them out and shut them down.
Yeah, and that Satellite News Channel was started by Lou Ciaffi, no relation, I'm sure. But
it was actually one of the thrills of my young career that I actually got to talk to him on the phone.
Lou Ciaffi?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember where
He was at
it
ABC.
was. He called. I think I was in New Orleans at the time, and he called, and I don't know if I happened to answer the phone or someone may have called me and said, "Hey, I mentioned that I was talking with Lou Ciaffi and he was on the phone."
Right.
And I did get on the phone with him and had a very nice conversation, but we were not related.
Right.
There's also the actor Charles Ciaffi, who he's a character actor. He's been in many things. You've probably seen him 100 times. I'm not sure, if he's still, acting at this point in his life, but he was on the X-Files. Among other things.
All right.
So if you Google Charles Ciaffi in the Internet Movie Database, you'll get a long resume of and also not related to me.
And a lot of people think that you're also related to a radio voice, Kathleen Ciaffi, who used to be on CBS Radio, but there's no relation.
No relation. Although she and I have met and we've spoken many times. So she gets the opposite question. So she gets the question also. I've gotten a question of whether I was related to her. It's Catherine Ciaffi.
Catherine Ciaffi.
Right. And my youngest daughter's name is Catherine. But no relation. But yeah, it's kind of odd because it's not a name that really shows up very often.
Right.
And yes, Chuck, the reference to pecan pralines is from the episode of I Love Lucy as they are gone their way clean to Cincinnati. Oh God, we're not back in the same place. Not unless they've opened a chain of these across the country.
Would you like to have on Friday to celebrate our exit a specialty of the house?
Which is a cheese sandwich. Oh God, it's so amazing that we just sort of have instantaneous memory when it comes to this sort of stuff.
Right.
And yet we can't remember to take out the trash.
Yeah. Yep, that's right. Casey Stengel, you ask him, what did you have for breakfast this morning? He couldn't tell you, but he could tell you what he had 50 years ago. He was that kind of, his mind worked in that manner or that.
James Moore, here's an interesting thing. He says, I got the privilege to meet Harold Taft, the first meteorologist to be seen in a TV weathercast.
Really?
Wow, that's incredible. I actually, and he was around for a long, long time. If he wasn't the first, he certainly was among the first, was Nash Roberts. In New Orleans, he had just retired. He was a god in New Orleans in terms of being on TV. And
every metropolitan zone has somebody who is a quote legend that everybody remembers. I guess here in New York, originally it was Tex Antoine, and then it became Frank Field, and I'm not really sure who they would refer to as the legend now. Who's been on the longest now, 33 years, is Nick Gregory on Fox 5.
33 years.
33 years.
That's
Nick
great.
has been on.
Good for him.
That's great.
Johnny Quest, there's the answer to your question. There's no organized severe thunderstorms being forecast from the southern end of that front.
Right.
Okay, just letting you know, because I saw him put up. He did put up that question, and I had the map in front of me, so I figured that was the easy way. So we've got triple nickels on right now. We just got down to 546, but for a brief moment that we had 555.
I have a feeling we're going to have a tremendous audience on our last day on Friday.
Well, we could. Robert Brown, Willard Scott was my hero. I actually worked with Willard Scott for 2 years. It was such a wonderful time. While I was in college, I also got I was very lucky, and I worked as his producer on the Today Show, and I just had a blast. Had an absolute blast with him.
Willard was the original Ronald McDonald.
Yes, he was.
And then corporate.
He's retired now.
And then the corporate people told him that they were getting another Ronald McDonald because he wasn't quite playing it the way it should be played. He's the guy who created it. And then the corporate people said, "No, we think we could find somebody a little bit better than you to play Ronald McDonald."
Scott Briller reminding you and I that there's some sort of special announcement coming on Friday from the moderators. Okay.
Who are the moderators?
Well, Scott's one. Johnny Quest is one.
Wait a minute, Bozo the Clown is another? No, wait.
No, he's not a moderator. No, you're right, Robert. He was Bozo the Clown also.
Right.
Because I think that show was produced regionally in some places. The
The
original one was in WGN, and then
there were others. There was the one main Bozo was Larry Harmon. That's a name that sticks out above all the others. But there were each region had their own Bozo show and had their own Bozo.
Yes.
It sounds.
I know it does sound a little odd.
This is the honest to God truth. I worked with a guy on radio in Binghamton, New York, WENE radio. His name was Tom Carroll, and his main claim to fame, he says, and he went on the Joe Franklin show. He was making such a big fuss about, I was on the Joe Franklin show. If those of you old timers remember Joe Franklin, and he said that he was the bozo that got cursed out on the air by a kid. That they used to have a game, a contest between two kids, and one of the kids, the kid who lost the contest, said, "Oh, blank," live on television. And according to Tom said to the kid, "Oh, no, you shouldn't say that. That's a bozo, no." And the kid looked straight up at him.
No, I can imagine.
Well, you can imagine.
I can imagine.
But this was something they told me about, and he was proud of it. He said, all of those bozos claimed that they were the one who got cursed out. Believe me, Joe, I was the one who got cursed out by the kid. That was his main claim to fame,
wow.
being a bozo, so to speak.
James W. Hi, James. As far as my weather meeting in Bayonne, New Jersey, that's next Wednesday on the 20th of November at 7 o'clock. And by the way, if you go on my Facebook page, I did put up something about the Bayonne Library, the address, so that if you want to come out, it's absolutely free. Usually these talks go about 90 minutes, and we have a lot of fun at them. So come on out, and certainly everyone is welcome. If you're in New Jersey, it's certainly going to be an easier trip. If you're flying in from another nation, you might want to book your hotel and everything else. But will I be having one in New York City at all, or in New York in general? I do have. I have one tentatively scheduled in early February at the Sachem Library in Holbrook, New York. I think it's around February 4th, but I haven't heard back from them yet lately, so I got to double check with them about about where that stands. But I think that that's the date. But I don't have anything else scheduled. But if you want me to come out to your local library, folks, if you're in the New York, New Jersey, Long Island area, even into Southern Connecticut, let them know I'm available and have them contact me, and we'll see if we can work something out. I certainly am going to have more time in my hands.
We should do something together. Maybe see if we can get the Nassau Coliseum, rent that out for.
Oh, sure. Steve Caprizio, I fished with him, by the way, a few years ago. I went on a fishing trip with him and Rich Von Olin and a few others. We had a great time. Went up salmon fishing up in Pulaski and had a great time. John Trabacchino. He's been a legend on WTEN. He's been there for 30 plus years. It's been a long time. William Huber says we should have it in Madison Square Garden. If only,
Hey, look, the John Gambling show in the 50s had Madison Square Garden, filled to capacity. We have a good promotional department. Maybe we can,
figure something out.
Yeah.
Oh, you never know. Well, Lisa Nieves, let the iSlip Library know. Have them contact me, and we'll see if we can, we'll book it and see what happens.
Joe,
you got to go, and I got to go too. So, all right, you go ahead, and I'm just going to give quick goodbyes.
Do a commercial, but we'll be back tomorrow.
Right, we'll be back tomorrow. So, if you haven't done it already, download the free weather apps, the Meteorologist Joe Chaffee weather app, and the Angry Ben weather app called the Angry Weatherman. Mine's available on Google Play on the App Store and for iPhones. Ben's only for Androids at the moment, but hopefully in a couple of weeks we'll have his available for the iPhone as well. Keep your fingers crossed that it lands on a kind person at Apple and approves it relatively quickly. Of course, remember you got my Patreon platform. There you go. My weather platform on Patreon, that's patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Chaffee for a more extensive and intensive weather experience. That includes extra videos, by the way, especially when weather is active. We do a Weather in 10 video that's only for Patreon members. Plus, you can message me at any time. So if weather's a big deal in your life, professionally or personally, it's a good place to be. So, and it starts at $2 a month. So think about it. Helps support everything I do. And one last thing, an easy way to support my channel is if you shop on Amazon. There's a link on the descriptor to this live stream, or if you're watching it on a replay, the descriptor to this video. I will put it up on the chat board right now. And we are a participant in the Amazon Services LLC program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees from Amazon by linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated site. So if you go there and just use the search bar and shop, you get your stuff. Amazon throws me some coin out of their pocket, and I get some candy canes and maybe a couple of cigars if I'm lucky for Christmas. All right, have a great day. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Paul Roman, William Huber, thank you so much for hitting Super Chat for the Lake Effect trip one day. Yes. Thank you so much, and Joe and I will see you tomorrow because we plan to do this every day this week before we get physically separated and have to figure out how to do it on Skype. Good night, everybody.